Hey, welcome. Have you ever felt like your brain has a mind of its own, especially when you're shopping? Well, you're not wrong. Turns out, it's using all these little hidden shortcuts that quietly influence our choices, pushing us in directions we don't even notice.
Okay, so let's just dive right in with a puzzle. Picture this. A restaurant in New York puts a $69 hot dog on its menu. Kinda crazy, right? But why does that suddenly make a $17 burger on the same menu look like a total bargain? So, the answer to that whole hot dog mystery? It all comes down to a really powerful trick our brain plays on us. It's called the anchoring effect, and it all starts with the very first number you see.
To put it simply, the anchoring bias is just our brain's tendency to grab onto the very first piece of information it gets. We call that the anchor, and then use it as a reference point for every single decision that comes after. And this little mental shortcut, it has a huge impact on your wallet.
So here's how it plays out. First, your brain sets that initial anchor. Then you try to adjust your thinking away from it. But here's the catch. The adjustment is almost never enough. We just don't move far enough away from that first number, which means our final decision is already biased, right from the very start.
Let's go back to our ridiculous hot dog. That $69? Yeah, that's not really a price. It's an anchor.
See, the restaurant probably never expected to sell many of those hot dogs. That wasn't the point. They put it on the menu to be a decoy. When you compare it to that absurdly high anchor, suddenly a $17 cheeseburger feels totally reasonable, maybe even cheap. And what happened? Cheeseburger sales went through the roof. Nespresso did something absolutely genius with this. Think about it. Instead of anchoring us to the price of a 45-euro bag of coffee, which sounds expensive, they completely re-anchored our thinking to the price of a single 50-cent pod. Now, you compare that to a €3.50 Starbucks, and that pod feels like a steal. It completely changes how we see the value. All right, so that's anchoring, and it's all about numbers. Now let's look at a second mental trap, one that works right alongside it. If anchoring is about the first number you see, the framing effect is all about the first words you hear.
So, the framing effect is what happens when our choices get swayed just by the way information is presented. Get this. The facts don't change at all, but the words used to describe them can completely flip our decision. It really is not what you say, but how you say it. At its core, framing is really all about perspective. Are you focusing on the positive, on what you stand to gain? Or are you focusing on the negative, on what you could possibly lose? That subtle shift in focus can completely dictate the choices we make.
Let's take disinfectant wipes, for example. One package says it kills 95% of all germs. Another one says only 5% of germs survive. I mean, which one sounds more effective to you? The information is identical, but that positive frame just feels so much more reassuring, which makes it an easier buy.
Okay, here's an even more serious example. A doctor tells you that a surgery has a 90% chance of survival. Now, imagine that same doctor said it has a 10% chance of death. It's the exact same statistic, but the feeling is completely different, right? This kind of framing can dramatically change how we feel about risk, and it can influence some of our biggest life decisions.
So, now that we know about these two incredibly powerful biases, what can we actually do? Well, the key is just learning to spot them in the wild. You can think of it like you're developing a new superpower for your brain.
So let's break it down one last time, just to make it stick. Anchoring, that's all about a number that sets a reference point your brain gets stuck on. Framing, that's about the words, positive or negative, that change how you feel about the exact same information.
All right, so here's your mission, should you choose to accept it. I want you to become a bias detective. This week, when you're looking at your receipts or flipping through store flyers, just see how many examples of anchoring and framing you can spot.
Because, once you start seeing these mental traps everywhere, and trust me, you will, it leads to one last, really fascinating question. Now that you can see the strings, who's pulling them?